Okay, let's move to our Mr. Khalid Boudali, Deputy President Officer for North Africa for the African Union ECOSOC and Chairperson of Peace Key for Solidarity and Development in Morocco. And first of all, I want to thank Mr. Khalid for his help for us to hold this webinar. He helped us a lot. Thank you very much. Mr. Khalid, from your experience in working with migrants, how can you see the challenges that they face, especially in Africa, especially in North Africa region or in Morocco, because Morocco is one of the most affected countries by the illegal migration or irregular migration. Mr. Khalid, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. First, I have to extend my deepest appreciation and gratitude to Maat for Peace, for their leadership, and to you, Mr. Rahman. Thank you very much for all your energy that you're putting into this, organizing this very important event. Also, I have to extend my greetings to all the participants and the audience here with us, and I send you greetings from Morocco. Responding to your question, it's all about migration in the context of Africa in the Arab world, brings opportunity, but also important challenges in vulnerability and discrimination, as my colleague, the PO, the presiding officer, said, and Mr. Naji also has raised this very important topics. If migrants' lack of access to human rights, their ability to benefit from migration is compromised, as it's their potential contribution to the development of the society in which they live or with which they are connected. Protecting human rights is important in order to promote the social inclusion and integration of migrants. Everybody's talking about governance of migration, governance that can be understood as a process in which the combined framework of legal norms and organizational structure regulated and shape law states act in response to international migration laws, addressing rights and responsibilities in promoting international cooperation. But addressing the challenges to human rights protection raised by international migration required the comprehensive effort of all stakeholders, a virtue of capacity to represent and support. There is no hierarchy between human rights. All rights are universal, equal, indivisible, independence, and equal of importance. Let's walk step by step and go through the COVID pandemic and the impact of the COVID pandemic on migration. We have seen cases and fatalities and still appeared comparably low in Africa than in another part of the world. The looming health stock of COVID-19 could have a disastrous impact on the continent, a really strained health system that could quickly turn into a social and economic emergency beyond health risks, push migration in rising. But the critics will affect Africa growth through domestic and external channel with a significant impact on the well-being in a number of people living in poverty. Nearly 2/3 of Africa are net importers on basic foods, and crisis-induced shortage could severely impact impact its availability. The health and economic stock will quickly put some, as we say, put some African countries on an unsustainable debt, and that's what we are afraid of: unsustainable debts. This unsustainable debts that African policymakers in their partners should reassess the trade off between short, medium, and a long-term priority. This and the, related policies measures will continue to involve an economies enter to successive phases of crisis response, surviving, let's see, the pandemic, ensure adequate resources, go to basic needs such as medicine and food, and ensure people's physical and mental health. It's very important, as well as safety, getting back to normal, support individual in farms to resume their activities and repair the damage created by the COVID. You know, it has to be sustained during this pandemic, and refocusing on the long-term shift resource and attention to long-term development. The immigration impact that we can ensure that the human rights of migration did not simply become a rhetoric, flourish when considered along with the economic, political, and financial implication of migration. I think there is a split in an exposed position in society has to be highlighted and remedied. It has to be recognized that migration was a fundamental human challenge, and it should never be forgotten that migration continued to make positive contribution to political, economical, and social and cultural fields of their society, and that's they intended to be not to be intended, or let me rephrase that. We don't want them to be forgotten in many debates. And thank God we have NGOs that really could advocate and fight for immigration rights. But the African Union and its organs has repeatedly demanded that migration must be addressed with the multiple sectorial approach. The African Union has adopted a common position on migration and development in the framework migration policy that's emphasized the socio-economic implication of migration. And let me give you a few models. The implementation of the orientation of the Agenda 2063 by promoting migration policy framework, action plan for Africa 2018-2030, the operationalization of the African Peace and Security Architecture, the APSA, and the African Governance Architecture, the AGA. Also, the capacity engagement for women and youth as mediators, actors in conflict prevention. And I believe that in the last summit, the commissioner has really come up with two initiatives by creating two panels, one for for FemWise, which is woman-wise, wise woman, one from each region, and also for youth. So the first time we've seen the AUC and the commissioner himself coming up with the genius ideas about giving the opportunities to indigenous youth and women to participate in regulatory platforms. But let's come back to irregular immigration that presented a particular challenge for governments, but migration as a whole was a positive force. Let's not forget that. And for asylum seekers and refugees, the impetus to move was to seek protection. As my colleagues, DPO and Mr. Naji has said, a protection and to reach safety, and their ancient rights of sanctuary was based on their shared humanity and must be respected and given meaning within the modern migration context. But migration can help achieve sustainable development goals, as has been mentioned in your conceptual note, from gender equality to urbanization, climate change, and poverty reduction, yet ensure about the how and the whether migration can help achieve specific SDGs. Evidence clearly based on a few researches that has been done by the AU and AU organs shows that migration will impact the achievement of all goals and that development will have an impact on future migration. But it is crucial that we understand the interrelation if we are to achieve our common goals, of promoting safe, orderly, and regular migration and holistic, sustainable development. That's the most important thing. Then we must reorganize the economic value of migration, including SGDs, the cornerstone of migration in the Agenda 2063. Also, the risks and vulnerabilities of migrants throughout the migration process are often overlooked, and that's what we should advocate for in development policies and programs. Two, of the impact of migration on crime, let's not forget that, because from what we have seen in Morocco lately, and the world is talking about it, we have to understand who's behind it. And as my colleague Naji has said, it's all about organized crime. So let's differentiate between protecting migration's rights and not to confuse them with organized crimes that they really benefit and use migrants for their own purpose. So when the focus was on illegal migrants, the aspect of the debate is often mischaracterized by accusation that higher levels of migrants lead to higher level of crime. The evidence based on empirical studies by many African countries indicate that there is no simple link between immigration and crime, but legalizing the status of immigrants has beneficial effect. And in addition to the impact of migration, one report, and let me just give you some inputs on that report. There is the alternative channel through which crime and immigration might be linked, namely migration themselves might be disproportionately victim of crimes in any positive way. But one most important thing, what we should talk about and we should insist and advocate it for, it's the economic and social challenge and migration benefits. The social economic security are closely connected. At the view of migration as an economic burden is often caused by a perception of migration as others. We always call them as others or Africans. And sometimes even us in the North, we say Africans, we forget that we part of Africa too. Due to their visible differences, economic stringencies caused by recession, social changes perceived to be uncomfortable, institutional overload of other sources of difficulties occurred or were widely remarked after the advent of a large-scale migration. Therefore, these problems, which can be seen as a threat to social security, are readily attributed to migrants' presence, and thereby elevate into problems of social security. Evidently, the argument that migration are the threat of states to the states, for example, economic security is heavily influenced by misconception prominent in discourse, as well as widely held stereotype about the foreigners, while especially refugees and asylum seekers. So let's not forget about migrants. Always sense they have that feeling that they are victims. Recollection between crime and migration rate actually signal increased crime against immigrants rather than by immigrants himself, in an area in which immigrants have rapidly become a substantial and visible minority. concentration areas have no association with violent crime. And overall, fairly weak effect. However, migrants groups that faces poor labor market opportunities are more likely to commit a petty crime, but not a high-level crime or with withheld of adjudication anyway. But the policy focus should therefore be on crime reduce effect in the functioning of labor market and workers in workers' skills rather than and crime in immigration. They can legally obtain work in the receiving countries, since the evidence shows that such legalization programs tend to reduce criminal activities among the targeted groups. I think I'll stop in here and I'll continue answering all your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khalid, for your presentation and this important information and point of view. You talked with us about the impact of COVID-19 on migrants and the African policy makers and what they should do in the future regarding the migration. And we also tackled the very important point of that migration should be contributing in the economic, social, and political situation in the host countries. And we also tackled the point of migration policy framework in the African Union. And I think this is very important to see how it is implemented in Africa. You also talked about how can the migrants have an impact to achieve SDGs and the abuse of irregular migrants to in organized crimes and so on. I thank you very much, Mr. Khalid, for your presentation, and please stay with us if there are any questions at the end of the webinar. Thank you.